Continuing on after our week in the village of Dubrovnik on the Makarska Riviera, we took a bus farther south along the Dalmatian Coast to the town of Dubrovnik. The route along the coast had some of the most beautiful scenery. One interesting place that we passed along the way, both from a medieval history and a current events perspective, was the area known as the Naom Corridor, a small strip of land where the country of Bosnia and Herzegovina bisects Croatia to reach the Adriatic Sea. This area has become controversial in recent years, but the history of the corridor goes back to the earliest years of Dubrovnik, which was founded in the 7th century. Romans from a nearby fishing village, now Kavtat, fled invading Slavs to settle on what once was a small island they named Ragusa. The Slavic tribes followed, settling Dubrovnik on the mainland, separated by a marshy channel. By the 12th century, the two had merged into the combined settlement of Dubrovnik, and the channel filled in what is now the main street, Stradun, in Old Town. By the end of the 12th century, Dubrovnik and the area it controlled, which kept the Roman name of Ragusa, had grown increasingly more powerful under the overall protection of Byzantium. Byzantium's power, however, was waning, and the power of Venice to the northwest rising. The Venetians increasingly saw Ragusa as a rival. In 1205, as part of the Fourth Crusade, Venice invaded Ragusa by both land and sea on the way to conquering Constantinople itself. Ragusa was forced to pay tribute for over 150 years until, thanks to a war between Venice and Hungary, Ragusa regained much of its independence as the Hungarian court at Buda was over 500 kilometers away. This arrangement stayed largely intact until, following the 1453 fall of Constantinople, Ragusa made a deal with the Ottoman Empire to keep most of their independence in exchange for acting as a buffer against Venice. Ottoman suzerainty continued until the Turkish defeat outside Vienna in 1684, when Ragusa once again switched loyalties to Hungary. Further Ottoman losses created the Naom Corridor in 1699 with the Treaty of Karlovitz. The corridor gave the Ottomans direct access to the Adriatic and gave Ragusa a land buffer against another Venetian invasion. Fast forward to 1998, after the breakup of the Yugoslav Federation and independence of Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Naom Corridor was activated once again. When Yugoslavia was united, the drive would only take 15 minutes. With the double border crossing, it is now 1 hour or more. In 2005, construction was started on a bridge to bypass the corridor and relieve the delay. Additionally, this contiguous land access is a prerequisite for Croatia to join the 26-member Schengen area, which would greatly boost its trade with the rest of Europe. Bosnia and Herzegovina complain that the bridge violates their sovereignty and will damage their already fragile economy. For now, however, the bridge is scheduled to open at the end of 2022. After the border crossing, we continued on to Dubrovnik, crossing over a beautiful bridge, then down to the port area and bus terminal. Our Sobe Homestay was a little over a half kilometer from the bus station and in a great area for us. There were plenty of grocery, vegetable, and seafood shopping options, convenient trash and recycling dumpsters with regular pickup, and even a nearby hairstylist. The Sobe itself was off the main street with a secluded courtyard and a place to eat outside and plenty of room for drying laundry. Between the Sobe and the port is a park with exercise equipment, picnic tables, and a great view of the port. We also didn't need to go far our first night to see a great sunset. The reflection on the water as the sun sank behind the hills helped to paint the entire neighborhood a wonderfully warm color. Also nearby was a museum about the history of the bygone era of communism in Croatia, from the origins of communism itself, to the rise of the Yugoslav Communist Party during World War II, to the economic gains of the 1950s, and the dark side of life in a totalitarian state and the personality cult of President Tito. The museum presented a balanced history. More unexpected were the exhibits of consumerism and everyday life, some sanctioned and some unsanctioned, that were more similar than dissimilar to equivalent life during the same period in the United States. The museum also made clever use of augmented reality technology to accent what they felt were important points to highlight. On a corner of the very same side street as the Red Museum sits a Benedictine Monastery with a plaque and statue commemorating the 2003 visit and Mass of Pope John Paul II. According to articles from the time, 60,000 Catholics from all over the former Yugoslavia were in attendance, and the main road that passes by the port was renamed for him. One great thing about Dubrovnik was the extensive bus service, both local and regional. Another great thing was the 7-day Dubrovnik card. It cost 350 kuna, about $55, but there's a 10% discount for buying online, and you get 450 kuna in value right away in tickets to the Dubrovnik city walls and local plus regional bus tickets. There's also free entry into 6 city museums and discounts to shows, restaurants, and other entry tickets worth many hundreds more kuna, depending on how much you want to do and see. One day, we took the bus to the nearby ritzy neighborhood of Babencook to check out one of their beaches. The water, as usual, was beautiful, but the swimming area was primarily for a private resort, so we didn't spend much time there. Another easy day trip by bus is to the town of Cavtat, where the Roman settlers of Ragusa originated. Though there were no traces of Roman life, modern Cavtat is a wonderful change from tourist mob Dubrovnik. After a relaxing lunch by the water, we set out to find a place to jump in for a swim. A trail leads along the shore to the end of the cove, with numerous places along the way to drop down into the water. Cavtat is also in the Dubrovnik airport flight path, though we barely noticed most of the planes. In the end, we chose to stay close to the port and the bus station, and still had adequate space and privacy. Ferries are another easy day trip option, including a 2-hour ride we took to the port of Polace and the Miljet National Park on the island of Miljet. A naturally sheltered port, Polace gets its name from the 5th century Roman palace whose ruins still tower over the village of 100 residents. There are a couple cafes and restaurants, but the most numerous businesses are for renting bicycles to explore the park. An entry ticket is needed for the park, available by the palace ruins, not at the tourist information office immediately by the port. If you want to rent an e-bike, it's best to reserve ahead of time as demand is very high. Motor scooters are available for rent, but they aren't allowed within the park. They're intended for the rest of the island that lies outside the park. We opted to hike up and over the hill that separates the town from the main attraction, the 2 Brackish Lakes. Starting out on the large lake, we took the electric ferry first to St. Mary's Island that contains a Benedictine Monastery that was in use from the 13th through 19th centuries. Now the island is just a stopover hiking and swimming spot. Hopping back on the ferry to leave the island, the next stop was the Mali Most, small bridge that separates the large and small lakes. The water flows from large to small, so the most popular thing to do is to float under the bridge and swim in the small lake. The best day trip by far was to the town of Stone, about an hour 15 bus ride north. Located at the south end of the Pelješac Peninsula, Stone was historically strategic for the Republic of Ragusa, as it was a key land fortification against its neighbor and primary rival, Venice. The two hills provided a natural barrier, and stone walls were built to augment that. Today, the big attraction is to walk along the wall between Stone and Mali, Little Stone. Starting at the Stone bus terminal, the town itself is worth exploring, with cafes, an ice cream shop, a couple of eclectic statues, and a particularly good family-owned local winery. We started our climb at entrance C, getting discounted tickets with a Dubrovnik card. From the start, the wall looked pretty imposing, but climbing it was the reason we came. The stairs were narrow, but the railing secure. There were occasional platforms for catching your breath and passing, but sometimes you just had to squeeze by. The view gets more impressive the higher you go, and it's also easy to see the second reason Stone was strategic: the salt that's been collected here since Roman times, the oldest continuous operation in Europe. The walls to protect this strategic site are impressive. Constructed in the 14th century and originally stretching 7 kilometers, its current 5.5 kilometers makes it one of the longest preserved fortification systems in the world. Equally impressive have been the restoration projects. Seriously damaged by earthquakes in 1667, 1979, and 1996, the latest effort was only started in 2004. Open to the public since 2009, restoration is still ongoing. The walls flatten out at the top of the hill, and, with the end in sight, we pause for a selfie before heading down to Mali Stone. Originally built to support the other end of the wall, Mali Stone has gained a reputation in its own right for its oyster farms. Visible in the distance, they are also briefly visible from the bus and somewhat visible from the town itself. After making it down the rest of the way to the water, we took a look around the picturesque little town. We also had to try the local specialty before heading back to catch the bus. Fortunately, there was a much easier way back to Stone. One evening, we headed east of Old Town to check out a beach, a traditional style restaurant, and a reportedly excellent sunset viewpoint. Banhe Beach was very close to Old Town, too close because it was packed, but the drinks and people watching were good, and they had a memorable warning sign. The restaurant was well up the hill from the water. Hiking was an option, but we took an Uber. The restaurant is known for the peka style of cooking, traditional in all of the former Yugoslavia, as well as Bulgaria, parts of Romania, and parts of Greece and Turkey have also adopted it. Essentially a poor man's convection oven, also called sach, the bread or meat and vegetables is first covered in a shallow bell-shaped clay plate, then covered with flaming wood. Over a period of 2 to 3 hours, the fire burns down to coals and eventually burns out. We were lucky enough to have been introduced to it in Dubrovnik, where we got the real homestyle version. The end products looked similar. We had veal in Dubrovnik and pork and lamb at the restaurant, but, not surprisingly, while the restaurant version was good, the home-cooked version was so much better. After dinner, we walked farther up the hill toward the viewpoint to catch the sunset. Along the way, we passed through the village of Bosanka. From the 14th century, it was a key stopping point for trade caravans coming from the Bosnian interior before crossing the hill down to Dubrovnik. In 1991, in the build-up to the siege of Dubrovnik, the old caravan route was used as an advancement line by the Yugoslav People's Army. We passed a sign commemorating the devastation the village endured and some ruined buildings left over from that war. Moving on to our farthest spot, the view of the water, the island of Lokrum, and Old Town did not disappoint. We even caught some kayakers on a sunset excursion as well. And the setting sun against the peak of Surge was also pretty spectacular. Before it got too dark, we headed back down a nearby walking trail, and Vic noticed we had picked up a curious follower along the way. Mama was tied up nearby and didn't seem to care what her colt did. I was crushed to learn that it wasn't my sparkling personality or movie star good looks, but the smell of dried cranberries in my bag that was the attraction. Eventually, the colt returned to Mama, and we continued down, catching some more amazing views and the tail end of the sunset as we made our way to the nearest bus stop. One of the last things we did in Dubrovnik was to see a production of Hamlet in the iconic 16th century Lovrenjač fort, which rises beside Old Town, towering alone above the waves. We could see part of the bleachers from a couple different angles, and on the night of the performance, the fort loomed above us as we had to climb up to see the show. We arrived a little early so that we could take in the sights from the top of the cliff. A panoramic view of Old Town and other parts of the city in the fading light of dusk. The waxing moon provided its own accents. 3 tiers of the castle were used as the stage. Photography was not permitted during the performance, but official images give a taste of how the production used the most of the structure. It was a different but well-done adaptation, and we truly enjoyed it. This concludes part 1 of our Dubrovnik vlog. Part 2 will cover all that we did in Old Town, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, please support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. Hvala.